Okay, just to recap here really quick. I know, by the way, I forgot to mention, I do record my videos. Most of them are from last semester, but I'm updating today's video. We're doing 2.1, organizing qualitative data. We've got a frequency distribution. We list each category and the number of occurrences. A relative frequency distribution, which also has each category, but we list percents. We use decimals, and a Pareto chart, a bar chart in descending order. So I'm going to screen share here this time now that it works. And if you go to assignments, and if you go to, I think, the bottom, you've got in-class worksheets, and I've got worksheet 2.1. So go ahead and download that, and then we'll open it up. Okay. So this is an example here. Some data that you might collect. Physical therapist wants to know if the types of therapy required by a patient create a table with a relative frequency. So this is actually right here. This is a frequency distribution. We've got body part, back, wrist, elbow, hip, shoulder, etc., etc. So you can see each of our categories here. So I've already listed here a frequency distribution. You can see the frequency, the number of patients that came in with these types of injuries. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, at this point, we're going to do a relative frequency. So the question is, how do I turn 12 into a percent? You know, don't you? Tell me your name.
Josh.
Josh?
Would you put 12 over the total number of people?
Are there only 12 people?
Well, 12 over the total number of...
Okay, now how do I find the total number of people? We're going to add them up. Okay, so down here at the bottom, I'm going to add them up. Now, they have this button here. It looks like a funny looking E. It says auto sum. It's actually the Greek letter sigma. And I do want to let you know that's a capital sigma. The lowercase is also called sigma. Okay? Now, this one here, you're generally going to think of the word sum, with the funny looking E. The zero with the tail on the top, you're generally going to think of as standard deviation. We're not going to talk about standard deviation today, but for those of you who can't see what I just wrote on the board, let me show you that really quickly. This is uppercase sigma. It generally means sum. Lowercase sigma generally means standard deviation. We're going to talk about standard deviation later this week. So it's the same letter. It's just the Greeks make their letters look really different when they want to. Okay? All right. So now, coming back to, oh, I hate this. Excel here, if you click on the auto sum button, it tries to guess, oh, is that what you want me to add? And so it does this like kind of Las Vegas light show thing and kind of, you know, kind of in Las Vegas. Is that what you want me to add? Sometimes it guesses right, it did. So we've got 28 patients here, okay? Now, what you're going to do is, as Josh said, anytime you want to do a formula, you always have to start with an equals, okay? That lets Excel know, oh, I'm going to do a formula here. So I'm going to take, and then just use your mouse, click on the 12, and then I'm going to hit slash for divide, and then you're going to click on the 28 with your mouse, okay? So it builds the formula in here, B5, cell B5, divided by cell B15, okay? All right, so 12 divided by 28 works out to be about 42, almost 43%. Okay, now you may say, hey, I like that formula. And if you press Control C, that equals copy. I'm going to give you a few other ones. Control X equals cut. Control V equals paste. Okay, I'm going to warn you, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know, but I'm probably going to do it too fast. So if you want to go back and watch this video, you can. And so I'm going to try to teach you some shortcuts so that The first test, remember we've got a two-part test. It's probably going to be next week, probably Thursday and Friday. Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday will probably be the written test in class. Thursday will be the computer test in class. You will want to learn these shortcuts because everybody's always short on time. You only get an hour because I have another class that meets right after you guys, and it's completely full. Okay, so you can't stick around because I need every desk. In fact, I still have a wait list. Probably won't tomorrow, but today I still have a wait list. The wait list ends today. All right, so now what you can do is if you go down one with your mouse or with your keyboard, you may want to hold the shift key down, and then if you use the down arrow, you can highlight those cells below, and you're going to press Control V. And you'll notice that formula didn't copy very well. I actually did that on purpose. Okay? So if you look at cell C6 here, it says B6, which is correct. I want that 2, but it's now divided by this blank space, which is not that, which I don't want it to do. Okay? Now, there's a thing called F4. F4 adds a $, and what it does is it creates what we call an absolute reference. Okay? For those of you who are not seeing what I'm writing on the board here, let me show you really quickly if I can stop sharing. Oh, I think it did stop sharing. Okay. So we've got Control C copy, Control X cut, Control V paste. I've got the F4 key. Now, is anybody, I don't see any Macs here. You can do this on your Mac, but I think it's Command T. Command T does the same thing. But what it does is it creates an absolute reference. So let me show you here. If I share again. Okay, let's go back up to this one here. Okay, the first B5, I want that number to change. I want that to be what we call a relative reference. Relative references change. Absolute references do not change. So the idea here is I want the first number to change, but I want the second number always to be cell B15. So if you press the F4 key when you're editing this, you'll notice that it adds some $signs in the formula here. So I've got B5/$B$15. So the first reference is a relative reference that's going to change. The second reference is an absolute reference. I do not want it to change. I always want it to divide by 28 in this case. Okay? So when I press enter, you'll notice it doesn't look like anything happened. Okay, however, when I copy this now, and then if I go down and I paste it to these other cells here, Control V to paste, now it all works up, and hopefully when I add this up, it adds up to 100%. Look at that. Okay? You'll notice here as you look in the formula column here, notice the B15 does not change, the second number does not change, but the first number does. So it works exactly the way I want it to, okay? So that's a skill that you will want to learn certainly by next week, hopefully by tomorrow, okay? We're going to use this skill a lot. We're going to use absolute references a lot. We're going to use relative references a lot. You have to understand the difference. What I'm teaching you here is Excel now, not math, okay? But those are important skills to learn. All right, so now, let's talk about a cumulative distribution. I forgot to write that one on the board, so I'll write it now here. Let me stop sharing. So a cumulative distribution is the sum of all items above, and then we're going to do a relative cumulative distribution which is the sum of all percents above. Okay? So let's go back here to Excel. Okay. The first one, okay, we're going to add up all of the back injuries. I'm just going to press equals, and then I'm going to click on the 12. Okay. So the first one's 12, so that one doesn't really change. The second one here is going to be the 2 wrist injuries plus the 12 back injuries. Okay. Now, if I do this properly, these two formulas are different. The second one is the one I want to copy this time. I want them both to be relative references, and if I do this correctly, it should add up to 28. And they do. Now, some of you may do this wrong, so I'm going to do it wrong and show you what not to do, okay? Some of you say, well, 2 plus 12, that still equals 14, right? That doesn't look like it changes. However, when I copy this wrong formula down, it no longer adds up to 28. You see that? So make sure when you're doing this, you're doing the 12 above plus the 2 to the left. That's the proper formula, okay? And when you copy, oh, by the way, if you click on this little, notice you got a white cross here. If you click on the corner here, it turns into a black cross. If you double click that, it will copy and paste your formula all in one step. That's pretty cool. Okay? Those are the sorts of shortcuts you're going to want to learn so that you don't run out of time next week during the test. Okay? Does that make sense?
How did you just copy and paste it all?
Okay. So I've got my white cross here. If you put it right on the corner, it turns into a black cross. And then double click. Okay? Or click and drag. You can also click and drag if needed. All right, so we've done the cumulative distribution. Now we're going to do the relative cumulative distribution. Works the same way, but we're doing this with percents. So 42%, almost 43% of my physical therapy visits are these. Now, let's ask Juan, how would I do the next formula? Start with an equals, right?
Mm-hmm. And then click E5.
Click on E5, which is the 42%.
And then
plus
C6.
C6, which is the 7%. Okay? Now, so 42% plus 7% equals 50%, right? Mm-hmm. Just leave these as decimals, generally. Okay? Now, what should it add up to if I did it properly?
100%.
Should add up to 1 or 100%, and it does. Okay? So make sure that you understand frequency distribution, relative frequency distribution, cumulative distribution, and relative cumulative distribution. Relative generally means percent. Okay? Generally, we're going to leave these as decimals. Any questions? All right, so now what I'd like to do is I'm going to show you how to create 2 different types of graphs. First one we're going to do is a pie graph, okay? So I'm going to do a frequency pie graph, okay? So I'm going to take these first 2 columns here. I'm going to highlight them. Make sure that when you do this that you include the column headings. So put body part and frequency. Highlight that. Now, to do a pie graph, we're going to insert, going to go to pie. We've got this one right here, pie graph. Okay, never, never, never use a 3D pie graph. Okay, it's very artistic. It also distorts your data. Okay, so always use a 2D pie graph. Okay, now the nice thing about this is it puts the legend in there for you. You can see back injuries are almost half of the problems. Might want to change the title from frequency. We can say physical therapy visits. Okay, so you can give it a better name. Please change the name. Excel usually doesn't guess your names very well. Use a name that describes what you are measuring. Okay. So there you have it. There is a pie graph. Okay. Now let's do a bar graph, but this time for the bar graph, I want to do a relative frequency bar graph. Okay. So I want the percents on this one rather than the raw counts. To do that, I'm going to highlight the first column, body part and everything down here. Now I'm going to hold the control key down as I select column C, the relative frequency column, just like this. Okay? So that's how you can select two columns that are not next to each other. Okay? Now I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to click on the bar graph. And once again, never use 3D. It distorts your data. We're going to use a 2D bar graph. Okay? And so now I've got a bar graph. Make this just a little bit smaller. Okay. Now, once again, I'm probably going to change my title, and I can say physical therapy visits. Okay. Now, in this case, I may not understand what these decimals represent. So if you click on the plus sign next to the graph here, this green plus sign, click on that, and then you could add axis titles. And so here, I can type in percent. And down here, I can put body part injured. Okay? Now, that's the most frequently missed question on the test is people forget to label those axis titles. Okay? Now, another thing that you could do, if you don't like the decimals, okay, what you can do is if you highlight your data here, I'm going to go back to here, and you've got the percent here, so I can change that to percent. The normal, and then if I want to add a decimal, just click on that button there. Okay? So now you can see it changes it on my bar graph to be percents, and I might not need that because it's clearly a percent. Okay? But generally speaking, most of the time, you'll leave these as decimals, but you can make them a percent that easily. Does that make sense? Okay? Now, we talked about a Pareto chart. A Pareto chart is a bar chart in descending order. Okay? So we can turn this bar chart into a Pareto chart. Okay? Now, the easiest way to do that is to highlight all of your data. I'm going to go to Data, and then I'm going to go to Sort. If you've included let me back up here. If you include the column headings in here, when you go to Sort, it will say, do you want to sort by, and I'm going to say frequency, and I want it to be largest to smallest. Okay? So now I'm going to turn this bar chart into a Pareto chart. Okay? So a Pareto chart is simply a bar chart in descending order. Now the idea here is, these are used a lot of times in companies. Okay? Let's say that your company has post this chart. They may want to say, what are the biggest problems we have? Oh, we have more back injuries than anything else. We're going to do some training so that people have fewer back injuries. Lift with your knees, get a partner, that sort of a thing. Okay, so you can see easily what's the biggest problem. The second thing are knee problems. Okay, what are some things we can do to fix knee problems? The third thing might be shoulder problems. What are some proper lifting techniques so we don't have shoulder problems? That sort of a thing. So that's what a Pareto chart is used for. Okay, so simply just sort your data in descending order. You just created a Pareto chart. Okay, does that make sense? Hopefully that didn't mess up any of my formulas. Sometimes it does. Okay? Any questions on bar charts or Pareto charts or pie graphs? Okay? Now, having said that, tomorrow's quiz, I'm not going to make you do it on the computer. You'll need to create these by hand, but I think it's probably fairly easy by hand, except for it won't look as nice. But guaranteed, you will have any graphing that you're going to do on the test next week is going to be on the computer. So make sure that when you're doing the homework tonight, you know how to create these on the computer as well as by hand. Okay? That makes sense? All right. So now, let's see, one more thing here. If I wanted two sets of data here, if you click on the tab down here, and by the way, on your test next week, you're probably going to have probably 4 or 5 problems. You'll have these tabs down here, okay? Don't do the first problem and say, wow, that was a short test, I'm done, and walk out of here, okay? Make sure you're looking at all the tabs. It happens to somebody every semester, and then I grade only what you turn in. You're going to get a terrible grade, okay? So make sure you're looking down here at the other tabs here. We've got 2 sets of data. Now I want to show you something. Let's say that this is some data on maybe education level in a certain state, let's say. Okay, so let's make a bar graph. Okay, now I want to show you a little thing that people don't pay attention to, but this can be a gotcha here. If you highlight both of these, you can say insert bar, 2D bar, okay? Now I'm going to label it properly, but I want you to look very closely, and then there's a problem with this graph. Besides that it's not labeled correctly. What's the problem?
The years are included as data like 1990.
Yeah, this education here, I didn't really want to graph that. Okay? I'm glad you're able to compare 1990 versus 2006, but it actually graphed the data here, those tiny bars. Okay? How do you fix that? Here's how you fix that. Okay? You don't want 1990 to be actual data here, so I'm going to double click it and I'm going to put an apostrophe in there. You'll notice that it's going to move from the right side to the left side. And it's going to put a little green thing here. If you hover over that, it's going to say, hey, this is stored as text. Is that what you want? In this case, it is. So I'm going to do that with the 1990 and the 2006. Now when I graph this, insert bar, and this, this time we're going to do a horizontal bar graph. Okay. That might be a little easier because then you can see the categories a little bit better. But do you see now I'm not graphing the 1990 and the 2006? Okay? Does that make sense? All right. So maybe this is education levels in a state. Okay? So whether they're vertical or horizontal, generally that's just kind of a personal preference thing, not a big deal, but that's how you're going to do that. Okay? All right, so let's move on to 2.2. Okay? The 2.1 was organizing qualitative data. 2.2 is going to be organizing quantitative data. Okay, and one of the main things that I want to just share with you here is we're going to talk about what's called a histogram. Histogram is like a bar graph with a couple of differences. Number one, the categories are numerical. Number two, the bars touch. And rule number three, that people who aren't here, but you all are here, and hopefully you're going to remember, you can't use the auto Excel function. Create manually. Okay? And the reason why, and I'll give you a reason why, because my data sets that I'm going to give you are going to be small, okay? And I want you to use 5 to 7 categories. Okay? So I'm not going to give you 100,000 data pieces. If I did, then you could use the Excel histogram maker. But let me just show you this. Okay, go ahead and open up the next spreadsheet, which is worksheet 2.2 in Canvas. Oh, I'm supposed to share that. Okay. We're opening up worksheet 2.2, which is right here. Okay. So we're going to do, oh, actually, I should add a 5th rule on here. The categories don't overlap. Okay? Now, go ahead and enable editing here. I want to create a frequency and relative frequency table. These are the lunch arrivals here, okay? Now, sometimes your data is not in the right place, so I'm going to show you how to cut and paste really easily. If you want to highlight your data here, remember Control X is cut. So if I press Control X, I can move my mouse over here, and I can press Control V to paste. Notice C, X, and V are all right next to each other on the keyboard. Now, another way to do that would be to highlight your data like this. If you go to an edge, not a corner, but an edge, you'll notice it turns into 4 arrows. If you click and drag, that does a cut and a paste all in one step. Okay? All right, now, as you can see here, a lot of times when you're making a histogram, it's useful to sort the data. Technically, you don't need to. Now, let me just show you how to do this wrong. Okay? I've got this on video. When somebody does this, I'll know they didn't watch the video. This is the wrong method. You go data, you go insert, recommended charts, and then you go with the histogram maker right here. Okay? That's the wrong thing. Okay? Don't do that. I want you to create your own. Now, let's go ahead and sort this data. Sort. You can see that the number of lunch arrivals every 15 minutes is between 1 and 11. Okay? So I told you I want 5 to 7 categories because I'm going to give you small data sets like this. So if I go 1s and 2s, 3s and 4s, 5s and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that gives me 6 categories. Do you see that? I should also add a 6th rule on here. Categories must be equally sized. So don't stop at 11. It's 11 and 12, even though I don't have a 12. You want all of your categories to be equally sized. Now, let me show you a little problem with Excel here, okay? So if I create groups, then I do the count in each group, okay? Now, you may go 1-2, 1s and 2s, right? And when you put 1-2, it turns it into January 2nd. And when you do 3-4, it turns it into March 4th. And I didn't want that to happen. That's when Excel gets annoying. So if I want to put 1-2, how do you fix that? Add an apostrophe. Apostrophe 1-2. Apostrophe 3-4. Apostrophe 5-6. Apostrophe 7-8. Apostrophe 9-10. And apostrophe 11-12. Okay? Now it works the way I want it to. Plus I want those, I don't want those to be dates. Now, a lot of you are bad counters. It's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm a bad counter too. Okay? Here's how you can count without counting. highlight all the 1s and 2s, okay? Now, if you look down here in the corner here, it tells you the average, the count, and the sum. So I've got a count of 7, okay? I've got 7 1s and 2s. 3s and 4s I have down here, 5. 5s and 6s, I've got 18. 7s and 8s, I've got 7. 9s and 10s, I've only got 2 9s. And 1, 11, and 12. Okay? So once you've done that, now you can follow the same thing we did for the bar graph. Highlight your data, yes?
Do the 1-2 one more time.
Put an apostrophe before you type 1-2.
But it just stays like apostrophe 1.
Yeah, that's what you wanted to say. Apostrophe 1-2.
Yeah, but in your Excel sheet doesn't check.
Let me look at your thing. Oh, you put exclamation point, apostrophe,
apostrophe
1-2.
4 in the one.
There you go. Okay. All right. Okay, so we're going to insert. We're going to do a bar graph here, a 2D bar graph. Okay. Now, notice the bars are not touching. One of the requirements is the bars must touch. Okay. Here's how you fix that problem. If you go over here to quick layout, click on the little arrow there. And if you grab that second one on the third row, look, all the bars touch now. Okay. Now what we can do is we can put down here number of customers. And over here we can put frequency or count. A lot of times I like count, but you could put frequency. So 7 times we had 1 or 2 customers. 5 times we had 3 or 4 customers, okay? And then you can say every 15 minutes at Wendy's. Okay? So make sure you're giving these good names. Where do they put number? Every. Okay? Number of customers every 15 minutes at Wendy's. Okay? All right, so that's a frequency distribution. We're out of time, but would you know how to do a relative frequency distribution? I might ask you that on the quiz tomorrow. What's the difference between a frequency and a relative frequency? Relative is a percent, right? Okay. All right, so I'm going to post this video up on there. There's already one there, but this will be a little bit updated. And I've got the channel in the announcements. If you don't remember, if you want to subscribe, you can see all the videos. The videos that are there are from last year, spring semester. So any questions before I let you go? Okay, quiz tomorrow will be on 2.1 and 2.2. It will not be a computer quiz. You'll have to draw these by hand, but next week on the test, you'll have to draw them on the computer. So try both methods. Make sure you know how. If you don't practice on the computer, you will run out of time next week. So make sure you practice, okay? See y'all tomorrow.